Hello from New Zealand. I guess the edge of the world will start these talks today. I will share my screen, and what I'm going to talk about is Vagrant and how I use it as being a DevOps leader in some organizations. Small introduction to who I am. I'm a DevOps consultant. I usually come to places which think that they want to do DevOps, and I come, listen to them. By the time they finish explaining their problems, they pretty much know what they do. I take my money and I move to another place. Um, I'll share my screen and let's get started. Right. So Vagrant, the carrot and the stick of the DevOps leader, and it's not. Didn't call it carrot and the stick just out of nowhere. This talk is going to be concentrated on how we take large organizations or even small ones that think that they're large and transform them into DevOps and how useful and helpful is Vagrant in doing that. And the main reason I call it carrot and a stick is that usually when an organization wants to move DevOps, nobody actually wants to move. So yes, everybody sees a bright new shine future, but people don't really like to get out of their comfort zone. So we need to show them a good carrot and we need to beat them with a stick. Otherwise, everybody are pretty happy at where they are. Well, except for the bottom line for the organization. So, and Zoom will work. So what is the challenge that we're actually trying to solve here? And the challenge is about bringing development people and operations people together. And in a large enterprise, those two are separated by many, many walls. And usually there is a lot of managers and talented managers that are very talented in building those walls. And people usually don't want to jump over those walls because it's difficult. We are engineers. We don't like to jump over walls. We like to write code, or we like to do ops, or we like to do both. But go and fight walls is usually not what they want. So there needs to be a mighty reward for going over that wall for the individual engineer, not talking about the organization, and something really should really disturb your comfort zone to move out of it. So let's talk about how we actually move the dev and ops together. And don't worry, we'll get to how we use Vagrant. It will get pretty obvious in the next few slides. So we have 4 challenges. And to move dev closer to operations and to move operations close to dev, they actually have the same 4 challenges. They just have a little bit different color of those challenges. So the first one is to train. Developers have no idea where they're deploying usually, or at least in the traditional world. And we need somehow to train them. And no organization in nowhere will ever let developer or software engineer to get near their vSphere or AWS management console until they feel they trained and until they feel that those developers will not destroy the organization. So first question, how we train the developers? Answer, I think you already guessed from the title of this presentation. Prototype. Developers love to write code. And we love to write code to solve our strange problems that we invented in our heads that we want to solve. But eventually, everybody wants to see something running. Nobody cares how many lines of beautiful code you wrote. People want to see your code solving their problem. And for that, you need to show them some sort of a prototype. Just showing people a bunch of code and, here's a bunch of code I showed to my presentation. Nice code. Doesn't really shows how it helps you. Trust. Operation people don't trust developers. I would even say more, that they moved beyond trust. They They're in the state of in despair in many cases. They don't suspect the code, the binaries will fail in production. They know they will. So there is a lot of proving developers need to do for the operations people. Validate. We've done our experimenting, but we need to show something that runs. It's pretty much the same as prototyping, but it needs to be a bit more than just some prototype. It actually needs to run, and you actually need to show those things to your operation people, to your testing people. It actually runs. Otherwise, nobody ever going to buy into it. Surprise, surprise. The operations people, when we try to push them close to developers, have the same challenge. They made this awful saying, infrastructure as a code. But before anybody, again, will let even ops people to deploy something on their Terraform or AWS cloud, they need to show that they can. And they need to show that in most of the times to themselves. Managers didn't understand it before. They probably won't understand it now, well, unless they were an engineer. But engineers like to prove themselves that they can. Prototype, same thing like this, like for developers. They wrote some code that's supposed to spin some environments. Let's test it out somewhere. How do we know our Ansible scripts actually deploy something, or our Puppet doesn't stuck in an infinite loop of installations? Trust. Same thing. Safe environments. Try them. Validate. Actually, that's the only place where Vagrant is not going to be really, really helpful for you, because that's where you move to Terraform. And I guess some of the guys that are following me on presentation will talk about that. So, Vagrant, the carrot and the stick. These are the 4 challenges. So what do? We take Vagrant. And I use Vagrant pretty much everywhere on those 4 categories. Developers and operations get to have local environments. They're simply going to run it on their machines. There is nothing that makes a lot of engineers happier than they can deploy the code on their own and run it on their own. That they don't need to go anywhere to beg for VMs. And remember, we talked about walls. Some of the walls are mighty. I've seen submissions of 3 months ahead for a VM. Believe me, by the time that VM gets there, the developers don't even remember why they asked for it. And suddenly somebody comes to them and say, guys, you don't have to do it. Here's a nice carrot. It's named Vagrant. You write a spec for your VM. You have enough memory usually in your laptops, and it runs. You don't need to actually beg for VMs for anybody. There's also a stick. At that point, developers actually have to show you. What I usually ask for people is, in the end of your job, I want to see that file. And that file is supposed to do everything. In this case, that's a file that builds up a Swarm cluster and runs a web app on it. But that has to work. It's no longer throw the code over the fence. It has to be there. And this goes not only to whatever they develop, it goes for training. People went to training, in most cases, people get back, they show you a nice report that we have trained, and by the time they actually get to use it, everything is forgotten. Me personally, when I go in training and I come back and I need to use it 3 months after I've been in the training and I never used it before, don't come to me. Training is gone. I'm going to read the books all over again. And in this case, you went to training, you came back, you have an environment that works, that you created during the training, and you actually have to submit it to the repository. No more sitting and sleeping in some university that you went. Something has to get out. This is sort of a pretty massive stick to people, because they got used to just sit there and listen to something. Prototype. That's the same thing. Vagrant allows to prototype the system locally. And it's not just about prototyping that system. I have created that Vagrant file that I've shown 3 seconds before, and it brings up the whole environment. And that thing can go to your test team, and that thing can go to your production team. And you don't have to carry massive drives. It downloads a virtual box from the internet. So that's a massive carrot. Your testers are no longer chasing the developers. Oh, guys, can you please explain me how do I set it up on my machine? What do I need to download? And then half of your developers in the team spread around actually installing systems for people. They don't have to. They give the Vagrant file, the person hits Vagrant up, and he's done. You don't have to explain him everything. It says what ports out there, it deploys all your script. It's usually pretty much lightweight. They just clone some repository, and that's it. Again, a stick. You cannot simply throw it over the fence. When somebody comes to you and says, you know, it doesn't work, you know it ran exactly like you gave it. So unless he managed to somehow break the Vagrant itself, which is sometimes pretty difficult, that means you have a bug. And that means you actually have a reproducible bug. The old days where you knew you have a release date, where you throw the binary over the fence and you just know that it's going to take them 3 months until somebody tries it out and you'll be on a different project and never have to answer anybody about this again, are gone. And that's a mighty stick for developers. The same, by the way, goes for operation people. You get a system, it runs. No more it doesn't work. No more we fail to deploy it. They have a live running example on their laptops. Trust. But the words here says a defined deliverable. That delivers a Vagrant file. I took it from my right hand, I gave it to the operations people, and they run it. There is no 300 pages description of how to install, which is outdated, somewhere between release R1.1 to R1.2. It runs. It either runs or it doesn't. Unlike documents that can have a lot of words in them and do nothing. Validate. Again, that's all about trust. You test before you ship it. And when you have testers, you give them the Vagrant file and they are happy. I had a very great experience when I came to testers in one of the places, and the guys were simply trying to install the system for 3 weeks. And I just gave them the file and told them, guys, Vagrant up, and on this URL, everything will work. And that's it. They didn't have to understand the Java, the Apache, the Tomcat, the Oracle, the database behind this product. It just ran. That's it. All they needed was to stick 16 gigabytes of memory into their laptops. And apparently it was much easier to organize than all the other documents and explanations that were formally handed over for them. Again, this is a big part of what I use Vagrant for, is I push people out of their comfort zone to overcome challenges. And examples, and not only personal examples, but an example that you can give to people that make other technical people work better. When an engineer sees a working piece of code or engineer sees a nice deployment, they know they can do it and they are going to do it. Everything is difficult on the first time, and the minute they've seen somebody did at least slightly simple or a simplified version for that, they are running forward. They are going to develop, they are going to add stuff. It's a credible multiplier to any development when they have a small working sample. And of course, there's a stick in this one. It's a perfect excuse killer. You cannot just blame any other environment code. I haven't deployed it correctly. You press Vagrant up, it works. Doesn't care about your environment. As long as you can run Vagrant and you have VirtualBox, it's going to run there. it moves the things. People start doing their work instead of complaining, and people start wanting to do their work instead of complaining. They finally have the chance for it. Distrust. Walls builds distrust. Whenever there is a war between developers and operations people, they stop trusting each other. And when the and it's there is even more. When a developer needs to talk to operations through three managers, a 500-page document, uh, four formal meetings and reviews, by the time they're over, nobody wants to talk. Operation people look at this document as their worst enemy. Developers don't remember what they wrote in the first page when they're on page 10. You hand over a running file. Yes, it's small. Yes, you cannot deploy to serve 300,000 people, but it runs. And both sides know how it runs, and both sides can use that run. And Vagrant is a massive distrust killer, because when I wanted to ask something, I just gave, guys, here's a Vagrant file that does it. Can you please upscale it and make it and add all your features? And people just went and did it because the message was clear, the language was clear, and the criteria was clear. And the minute you have clear language, common criteria, and it's all clear, distrust dies. And Vagrant file and the Vagrant is a new language. Hello, guys. Somebody just turned on their mics. Um, 1 second. Okay, going forward. Um, so Vagrant is a way of creating trust between people due to the common language. Vagrant prototype it all. I cannot. I can talk hours about how prototyping is important. Mostly because when people start talking about DevOps, it's because they started to do of Agile. And prototype is a key part of Agile. And whenever DevOps brings its added value to Agile teams, it's a lot about prototyping. And like I said, there is no better tool to prototype. You just write a Vagrant file that brings stuff up and running. And whenever you have to do your common Scrum meeting or the weekly review or the Scrum review, whatever you call in all of the different Agile types, you need to show something. The project manager wants to see something running. And Vagrant is just great. Clone your repo, write Vagrant up on whatever machine, and you show it to them. For this. And project managers are extremely happy to see that because they know it will run anywhere. It gives them a level of confidence they didn't have before. Those teams get nice presentations. Those teams get everything running from the first time in those demos, and project managers trust their teams. And it's a key thing for Agile organization. Another thing is, I'm also a tech lead. So in many times when I need to explain engineers, I tend to talk a lot. But pretty much what pretty much I'm doing right now. And a lot of engineers doesn't like long talks. They want define things, and they want to go and sometimes read it on their own pace and just go and do it. And many times I just give people, guys, here's a Vagrant file, here's what it does. it says hello world here, please fill with your functionality, and hello world there, please fill functionality. And suddenly everybody has a clear definition of what they want to do. That guy needs to do it here, this guy needs to do it here, and everybody see how it communicates. Everybody, basically all developers immediately become operators, and all operators, when they see their code, they immediately see where developers wrote code. And I originally stopped writing the long mails of description of what I have to do, or unless management makes me. I just send a Vagrant file saying, okay, this is with 2 or 3 lines of the topic, and people just look at it and everybody gets pretty much clear. Here is a database node, here is the front-end node, here is a security management system. It's all clear. The node names are in VirtualBox, and pretty much understood everything that got installed. And the last, but that's probably one of the great parts, is Vagrant power delivery. Now, I know we talked about Vagrant, but you can also do it with, you also will probably use Docker and Ansible in those things. But when we talk about CI/CD, a lot of my CI and some parts of my CD are Vagrant based, because everybody that clones that repository can run it. The CI itself clones the repository and run it. Go, that's a virtualization. And actually works. Testers simply grab the Git file, Vagrant app, and start writing their tests. They don't have to wait for anything. They don't need to wait for things. You can test it. You can even A/B test in production and just move the whole environment forward into the production and redirect some of the people there. And of course, last but not least, then you scale to Terraform. It's important to know, like I just described the Vagrant as the best thing from the after invention of the wheel, but it's not a full production system. So in the end of Vagrant, you have to scale to Terraform or other systems. But for the CI part and some parts of the CD, Vagrant is an amazing tool to be prototyping, to be training, and to show stuff. Right. So, I'll show a small presentation of how I gave one of the tasks to guys in my team. It will be, of course, based on Vagrant. You are more than welcome to ask questions afterwards. And we almost run out of time, so I do hope we actually manage to put in the 6 minutes I'm left.
Okay, thanks so much there, Anatoly. That was awesome.
So I think you can see my VS Code. And in the end of the presentation, hopefully it will get shared. There is 2 links to all the code that you're going to see right now. Basically, what I needed to deploy a small web service with a, not even database, it's just supposed to access a shared volume using Swarm. We are doing the Swarm installation for quite distributed system. And I just gave them that. That Vagrant file will set up a Swarm cluster on everybody's VM. And basically, I just write Vagrant app, wait for the next probably 10 minutes, but then it have a running system. And I just send it to my developers and operations guys, said, guys, operations, can you please make VMware work like this? And then I called to my developers and said to my developers, guys, you're going to have something like that implemented in VMware. Fill in the binaries that needs to get deployed. And somewhere 1 week later, I was going past by the operations teams, and they actually like, VMware run. Okay, does it work the same way? Yes, it works the same way. And they were just literally making one-to-one match on how it works in the Vagrant box as they spinned up and to the real production environment. And it was amazing thing to view, because there's nothing as good as reference to do stuff. So me, from looking at my terminal, there's very low chance that I actually finish to boot up in the last 5 minutes. So if you guys have any questions, I will be very happy to answer them, and we can move on to the next guy whenever our MC is ready.